Imagine you find yourself in a place with no one around for miles. You're surrounded by lush vegetation, and you're also being stared at from all sides. These eyes are drawn, but that only seems to make it creepier. But it's even more terrifying when you see those to whom they belong. These are dolls. Not just ordinary dolls, but painted, warped, broken. And there are hundreds of them. Makes you shiver, doesn't it? And you want to get out of here. Well, that's only if you can find a boatman to take you away. Getting out of here is as difficult as getting in. Here's a hint. You're in a corner of the globe you'd rather stay away from. Today, you're going to find out what makes GPS go crazy in an area of Maryland. Where are the doors to hell? Which town has an endless underground fire? Have you fastened your seatbelts? Then let's go. We'll visit 10 amazing places people prefer to stay away from. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to watch even more exciting videos. And we'll start with an amazing spiritual center, which is actually a very famous tourist spot. But it has one place that people avoid. How come? Let's take a look in there. In the heart of the sacred forest, in the Meade Prefecture of Japan, lies the ancestral shrine of the Japanese emperors, the Grand Shrine of Ise, or Ise Jingu. It is the most important Shinto center in the country. It consists of many shrines centered around two main shrines, the Naiku Shrine, dedicated to the sun goddess Amaterasu, and the Geku Shrine, dedicated to Toyouke, the goddess of food, clothing, and shelter. The Naiku Shrine is demolished and rebuilt every 20 years in accordance with the Shinto idea of death and rebirth. And the main shrine preserves the most important object in Japan's imperial history, the sacred mirror. It is one of the most important imperial regalia, representing the spirit of Amaterasu. It would seem that such a place might be a tourist center. Basically, it is. Attending the shrine site is a real pilgrimage for Shintoists, and the emperor also makes an annual visit here. Yet, people stay away from the main shrine. The reason is simple: because they can't enter it. The temple is inaccessible to ordinary visitors. Only senior priests and the emperor are allowed inside. The general public is not allowed into the central buildings, hidden behind 4 high wooden fences. But tourists are free to stroll through the forest, including its alleys, which date back to the Meiji period, i.e. from 1868 to 1912. Still, one can admire this place easily. Yes, this is the least scary place in our top 10, but we are only at the beginning. The next spot also used to be closed to the ordinary public for religious reasons. But although now there are no bans, there are few people who want to get there. Let's move to the Komi Republic in Russia. Here, west of the Ural Mountains in the Toretsko-Pechorsky district, rise the rock formations of Manpupuner. This translates as small idol mountain. These are 7 stone pillars in a bizarre shape. In geology, such formations are called buttes. And although Manpupuner is quite a popular attraction, it is not tainted by tourism at all. In fact, it has guests quite rarely. The height of these rocks varies from 30 to 42 meters. About 200 million years ago, there were high mountains in place of the stone pillars. Rain, snow, wind, frost, and heat gradually destroyed them. The surviving remnants are made of hard rock, which is why they have survived to this day. Although there is a slightly different geological version. According to it, there used to be a mountain with cavities or caves. At some point, magma was squeezed out of the bowels of the earth from below into these voids, and filled them like soft ice cream fills a waffle cone. Over time, the previously mentioned climatic factors destroyed the mountain, and it crumbled, becoming a simple pile of rocks. The solid lava, on the other hand, remained. Continuing the analogy, the waffle cone crumbled, but the ice cream remained almost unchanged, replicating the shape of the cave's curves. One pillar, 34 meters high, stands somewhat apart from the rest. It resembles an upside-down bottle. 6 more are nestled on the edge of the cliff. The pillars resemble the figures of a huge man or the head of a horse or ram. These formations were once considered sacred by the local Mansi people. Maybe that's why there are many legends about Manpupuner. According to one of them, giants once kidnapped Aim, the chief's beautiful daughter. The girl's brother set out to get her back. The good spirits provided him with a magic shield. At the crucial moment, the young man took out the shield, and the sun reflected from it and turned the giants into stone. This is how the 7 rock formations appeared. According to another legend depicting conflicts between the Mansi and the Nenets people, the giants declared war on the Mansi. They climbed the mountain and saw a local angered deity nearby. This sight turned the giants into stone pillars, and so they stand to these days. And their shaman dropped his tambourine. The instrument rolled and turned into Mount Koip. In the past, this place was forbidden. Only Mansi shamans were allowed to climb the plateau. It was prohibited for ordinary people to come near the weathering pillars. It was regarded as a terrible sin. Nowadays, this place is rarely visited, mainly because it is rather difficult to get here. The plateau is protected by UNESCO, and the pillars themselves look quite dangerous, as if they were about to collapse. That's why even daredevils prefer to stay away from them. Our next place is no less beautiful, but it is barely visited. A little-known piece of land, Heard Island, is often hidden in thick clouds. It is located about 2/3 of the way from Madagascar to Antarctica and is part of the Heard Island and McDonald Islands in the southern Indian Ocean. This deserted island was spotted by the American sailor John Heard from the ship Oriental in 1853 on his way from Boston to Melbourne. A month later, he reported his discovery, and the island was named after him. But people first landed on Heard Island only 2 years later. So why do people tend to stay away from it? The explanation lies rather in the natural conditions. To reach the island, you have to travel 4,000 kilometers from Western Australia across stormy and rough seas. From there, the journey takes 2 weeks by vessel. There are no ports or harbors on Heard Island, so ships have to anchor in the sea. The coastline is 102 kilometers long. Only fishermen and research scientists usually travel there, and if something goes wrong, they are unlikely to be rescued, as the location is remote. But those few who manage to reach this distant wonder can enjoy truly pristine and untouched nature. Also, there is an active volcano with a pompous name, Big Ben, covered with glaciers. Actually, the whole island was formed as a result of the volcano's activity. Its height is 2,745 meters. So it is the highest mountain on the territory belonging to Australia. Big Ben was formed about 1 million years ago, and now looks like a classic volcano, conical in shape, and consisting of layers of solidified lava, pumice, and ash. Smoke billows from its summit. In 1997, Heard and McDonald Islands were inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. There were 5 private expeditions to Heard Island between 1965 and 2000. Mawson Peak at the top of Big Ben was climbed successfully in 1965, 1983, and 2000. It has erupted several times in the last decade. The island is mostly inhabited by insects and has a large population of seabirds, penguins, and seals. It was seals that attracted fishing ships here in the 19th and early 20th centuries. As a result, the seal population has declined dramatically. Today, the island is protected. Since 1987, access to the territory without a permit from the Australian Department of Environment, Sport, Tourism and Territories is prohibited. And this is just for the better. As a result, the seal population has increased again, and in general, the area managed to preserve its pristine beauty. Now, let's move from the deserted island to another place, which is very popular among tourists. And now, it's prohibited by law to approach it. Yes, you got it right. This beautiful place is Pravcicka Gate, which is the largest rock gate of the Elbe Sandstone Mountains. The span is about 26.5 meters, and the height is about 16 meters. Yes, it was nature that created such beauty. Thanks to its unique charm, the arch became a movie star. You can see it in the Chronicles of Narnia. And yet, by law, you should stay away from this place. Why? It's because of concerns about the preservation of this rock formation. The natural arch is quite fragile and has been subjected to erosion by natural forces over millions of years. And intensive pedestrian traffic and human activity only further contributed to the acceleration of this destructive process. That is why Rockgate has been closed for a very long time, since 1982 to be exact. Visitors are usually allowed to view the arch from certain viewing platforms or from paths that provide a safe distance. Next is the place you can't get in unless you're a staff member, and if you get close, your GPS starts to misbehave. What does that mean, you might ask? Just that this place is so secret that the GPS on the car's dashboard gives wrong indications when approaching it. Are we in some kind of anomaly zone? The answer is that the military is jamming the signals there. The place is a U.S. Army facility in Maryland called Fort Meade. Can regular visitors get in? Obviously no. It includes several important structures, including a national security agency headquarters the size of the Pentagon. As in the case with many military sites, ordinary people prefer to stay away from this place. That said, it's worth noting that Fort Meade employs more than 54,000 employees, military and civilian, and is the largest employer in the state of Maryland and the second largest employer in the armed forces. But those are by no means the most interesting facts about Fort Meade. It is famous for being the scene of the paranormal. And this is not a joke, but officially declassified information. For nearly 20 years, since the 1970s, a secret army unit working together with the Defense Intelligence Agency conducted research and experiments that tested the use of so-called psychoenergetics for military purposes. With the $20 million Stargate project, the US government was trying to train an army of telepathists. The mind readers, or rather those who considered themselves as such, tried to get information about various inaccessible plans within the framework of the project. In some cases, they even tried to glimpse into the future. In total, 22 people participated in the operations and were tested for psychic abilities, and sometimes they were actually engaged in real intelligence operations. Presumably, their methods were used to find Brigadier General Joseph Dozier, who was kidnapped in Italy in 1981. They also tried to find the whereabouts of Saddam Hussein during the Gulf War, gather information on Russian submarine capabilities, and even find plutonium in North Korea. In 1995, the CIA deemed Stargate a failure. The project was shut down and declassified the same year. So the US doesn't have an army of magicians these days, at least according to the information available to us now. But people have a good reason to stay away from this place, even without regard to bans. There are at least 14 hazardous waste sites in the vast Fort Meade area, such as an ammunition disposal area, a landfill from the 1940s, a closed sanitary landfill, etc. After a 2007 inspection by the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Army promised to take steps to limit environmental damage. Whether they were actually taken is unknown. Now, let's move to another place in the U.S. that used to be prosperous, but now there's hardly a single person there. What happened? Centralia is a real ghost town in Columbia County, Pennsylvania. Its population has dropped from 1,000 in 1980 to 5 in 2020. So why do people now avoid this place? To answer this, let's travel back to 1962. It's unclear what the starting point was, but a fire broke out at Centralia's coal mine. The main version is that the city government hired 5 firefighters to clean up the city dump. They set the dump on fire and let it burn for a while. But unlike previous years, the fire was not completely extinguished. The fire eventually spread into a maze of abandoned coal mines near Centralia. Other sources say the fire started even earlier when a garbage truck dumped hot ash or coal into an open garbage pit. According to yet another hypothesis, the 1932 mine fire was never fully extinguished, and by 1962, the fire had reached the landfill site. But this version is disputed. Only 17 years later, by 1979, the locals realized the scale of the problem. It happened when a gas station owner inserted a probe into one of his underground tanks to check the fuel level. When he pulled it out, the probe seemed hot to him. It turned out that the temperature of the gasoline in the tank was as much as 78 degrees Celsius. The gas station had to shut down. But the problem gained the greatest amount of attention in 1981, when a 12-year-old town resident fell into a hole that suddenly opened up under his feet in his backyard. The boy eventually escaped, but the plume of steam escaping from the hole was tested. It was found to contain deadly levels of carbon monoxide. Centralia residents were split on whether the underground fire posed a direct threat to the city. Nevertheless, in 1983, the U.S. Congress allocated more than $42 million for relocation. Virtually all residents accepted the government's offer. More than 1,000 people left the city, and 500 buildings were demolished. In the 1990s, the forced alienation of all private property of the city in favor of the state of Pennsylvania took place. Residents were unable to appeal this decision, despite attempts to do so. And in 2002, the U.S. Postal Service stopped using the Centralia zip code. Today, few homes remain in Centralia. The area looks like a field with many paved streets running through it. By the way, the screenwriter of the movie Silent Hill examined Centralia while working on the script. The signs, metal steam vents in the south of the neighborhood, and smoke coming from cracks in the ground warn of the ongoing fire. According to forecasts, the underground fire could burn for another 250 years. And now we are going to take a closer look at another hotspot. Watch out, we're very close, and that means you'll get a blast of heat and hear the sound of 1,000 dancing flames. It's a gas crater near the village of Darvaza in Turkmenistan, in the middle of the Karakum Desert, about 260 kilometers north of the capital, Ashgabat. Officially, it is called the Shining of Karakum. Unofficially, the Door to Hell, or the Gates of Hell. So scary this place is. The nickname of this place alone is enough to keep one away from it. But there are even more substantial reasons. In fact, it is a burning natural gas field that has collapsed into a cavern, i.e., a void. The bottom and edges of the crater are ablaze with hundreds of natural gas flames. In some of these natural torches, the flames reach 10 to 15 meters high. The crater has been burning since the 1980s. It is 60 to 70 meters in diameter and about 30 meters deep. The early years of the crater are shrouded in mystery. Some claim that the crater collapsed in the 1960s and was set on fire in the 1980s to prevent the release of toxic gases, and so it has been burning ever since. Others insist that the site was drilled by Soviet engineers in 1971 as an oil field, but collapsed a few days later, forming a crater. The engineers decided to set the crater on fire to neutralize the release of toxic gases, but underestimated the volume of gas. In post-Soviet Turkmenistan, the crater became a major tourist attraction. In 2004, the village of Darvaza was disbanded by a presidential decision. 6 years later, the head of state visited the crater and ordered the local authorities to figure out ways to get rid of it, or at least make sure it wouldn't hinder the development of nearby gas fields. The village was later re-established by the renaming of Aeroport Village to Darvaza in 2016. In 2013, a state nature reserve was created in the Karakum Desert, including the Darvaza crater. That same year, traveler George Kourounis became the first person to step on the bottom of the crater. He was collecting soil samples for the Extreme Microbiome Project. The descent was sponsored by National Geographic and was featured in an episode of the National Geographic Channel series Do or Die. Kourounis discovered bacteria that live at the bottom of the crater at high temperatures. They feel excellent in this fiery hell, and curiously are not found in the soil in the area surrounding the crater. In January 2022, the president of Turkmenistan announced plans to extinguish the crater because of its harmful impact on the health of local residents, the environment, and the gas industry. But despite the president's intentions, the crater remains open and burning to this day. It is now surrounded by a low metal fence. This is done for the safety of tourists who still do visit the place regularly, despite the clear danger. Ordinary people prefer to stay away, and rightly so. And from here, we move on to another attraction, this time in Europe. It causes real terror in many people. This place is definitely not for sensitive people, but the tour will be much safer with us. So, welcome to a place in Palermo that will definitely impress you, the Capuchin Catacombs. Here, you will see real mummies. The beginning of this gloomy and nowadays tourist place was laid in 1599. The Capuchins, a religious order of Franciscan friars in the Catholic Church, mummified and moved a recently deceased friar, Brother Silvestro of Gubbio, to the catacombs. Gradually, other deceased monks began to join him. According to another version, the friars soon noticed that the bodies of the brothers laid to rest in the catacombs were little prone to decomposition. That is, they self-mummified. So the catacombs were turned into a kind of cemetery. Some bodies were embalmed. Others were placed in hermetically sealed glass cases. Monks were preserved in their everyday clothes, and sometimes with ropes they wore as penance. Originally, only deceased monks were left in the catacombs, but in the centuries that followed, burial in the Capuchin catacombs became a status symbol. In their wills, the local elite would ask to be dressed in certain clothes, or even have them changed regularly once they were buried there. Priests were buried in their church vestments, while others were dressed according to that day's fashions. Bodies stand, lie, sit, and hang in different poses with different head turns, so when attending this place, it feels like being in a real city of the dead. The halls were divided into categories: men, women, girls, children, priests, monks, and professionals. Relatives came to pray for the deceased and maintained the remains. What funds were used to maintain the catacombs, you may ask? They existed on donations of relatives of the deceased. And therein lies the rub, at least for those who could no longer or would no longer pay. Each new body was placed in a temporary niche and then moved to a permanent location. As long as the payments continued, the body remained in its place. But if the relatives stopped sending money, it was shelved until the payments were resumed. The last monk was buried in the Catacombs in 1871. It was Brother Ricardo. But even after that, famous people were buried there. Speaking of famous people, the Catacombs hold the remains of Italian painter Giuseppe Velázquez and sculptor Filippo Panino. This place was officially closed for burials in 1880. Nevertheless, the last burials date back to the 1920s to 1930s. The very last was Giovanni Licata de Bolsena, the Count of Isnello, in 1939. In total, the Catacombs contain 8,000 bodies, and 1,252 of them are mummified. It's certainly an impressive sight, definitely for thrill seekers only. But let's now move to another corner of Italy, though almost as creepy as the Capuchin burial catacombs. This is the island of Poveglia. It is located off the coast of Venice and Lido and is nicknamed Ghost Island because of its dark secrets. It is tiny and difficult to find on maps. In the 9th century, it was mostly inhabited by refugees from Padua and Este. When Venice and along the way Poveglia were attacked by Genoa in 1379, the residents fled to another island called Giudecca. Poveglia was then abandoned until 1527, when Italy was struck by the plague epidemic. According to local tales, at the time of the plague, people who resisted were dragged to the island by force if they had even the slightest symptoms of the disease. The first ships carrying plague victims arrived on the island in the 16th century. The dead were thrown into deep pits, and when they were full, they were set on fire or covered with earth. The 70,000 square meter area was used as a mass gravesite, where around 160,000 victims of the disease are believed to have been cremated to stop its spread. It is said that human ashes cover the island to this day. Is that not enough for you to stay away from this place? Then let's reveal another dark side of this island. In 1922, a psychiatric clinic was opened here, which functioned until 1968. Supposedly, gruesome experiments and surgeries were performed there, including lobotomy. And legend has it that the doctor who went mad, or, according to another version, the director of the facility, eventually committed suicide by throwing himself from the bell tower. After the psychiatric hospital was closed, the island was never really cleared out, so all the stuff was just left lying around. Nowadays, locals still avoid Poveglia Island. When the weather is clear, one can supposedly see skulls and bones beneath the surface of the water. And local fishermen enjoy fueling local legends by saying they hear screams and moans from the island and the sound of the bell on the tower. By the way, the bell itself was removed many years ago. The island, according to local legends, has permanent ghosts. Little Mary is a spirit that has been seen for over 400 years. This child most likely died of the plague. She wanders the beach and weeps blood-curdlingly. And Pietro, the ghost of a man in a wheelchair, reportedly still rides the corridors of the abandoned hospital. And then there's the spirit of a young woman with a terrified expression who is afraid of the mad doctor. In other words, visitors to the island feel they are being watched. But no one has lived here since the hospital closed. That is, since 1968. So who is it that still comes here despite everything? Adventurers and thrill seekers. But it's not so easy. First, you have to apply and get approval, which can take years. Visiting the place without it is illegal. A further difficulty is finding someone willing to take you there, as fishermen avoid the place by all means. Would you dare to set foot on this land? Share your thoughts in the comments. And now, from an island with a dark past, let's move on to another island where seemingly nothing terrible happened. Yet, it's creepy as well. Just on the south of the center of Mexico City lies the Island of Dolls. There are hundreds of dolls hanging all over this island. What's the big deal? Why would it be scary? Well, these dolls are broken and disfigured. The whole setting resembles a horror movie. You wouldn't want to be alone in such a place. But Don Julian Santana Barrera has been the only resident of this island for many years, since the early 1950s. The island itself became famous in 1943, when Mexican director Emilio Fernandez used it as the location for the movie Maria Candelaria. But back to Barrera. He grew vegetables and fished. He had to move to the island after being kicked out of his hometown of Barrio de la Asunción. But he didn't have it easy in his new place either. According to rumors, one day Barrera came across the body of a girl floating in a canal. According to another version, he heard the desperate cries, but could not save her, and the poor girl drowned. The next day, Barrera allegedly found a doll floating in the canal. He assumed it belonged to the girl, so he hung it on a tree in memory of her and as a talisman to ward off evil spirits. The next day, Barrera found a second doll in the canal, but the story didn't end there. Legend has it that the girl's spirit began to haunt the island. So, to somehow appease it, the man spent the next 50 years getting dolls in every possible way. In his own words, he mainly took them from the waters of the canal. But, according to Barrera, the spirit did not want to calm down. So, he began to break and disfigure the dolls on purpose, believing that this way he could restrain the ghost. His spooky collection, hung all over the island, consisted of hundreds of them. After Barrera's death, his family opened the island to tourists. In addition to hundreds of dolls, there are 3 huts and a small museum with articles from local newspapers about the island and Barrera. The one-room hut where he slept displays his first doll, as well as Augustina, his favorite doll. You can get to the island by a trajinera boat, but some boatmen refuse to take tourists there because of superstitions, and various rumors support them. Thus, there are reports that the dolls move their heads and arms and open their eyes. Visitors also claim that the dolls whisper to each other. Some visitors lay gifts around the dolls, asking for miracles and blessings. Some even change their clothes. The most curious thing is that virtually a real cult has been created around the drowned girl. But there is no proof she actually existed. This fact has not kept the cameras away. The island has been featured in many TV shows, as well as other places on our list.